Hello and welcome to the recording of the Splunk User Group for Edinburgh, Scotland. This was recorded on the 10th of February 2021, also as part of the Global Splunk User Group week. My name is Andrew, and along with Harry McLaren, I am the co-leader of this user group, and I'm also the organizer of the event that you're about to watch. We started recording the session a couple of minutes in, so I'm just here at the very start to cover off the general housekeeping for the user group. I'd also like to mention that we had some technical difficulties recording a couple of our panels, but this will happen in due course during the presentation of this session. Before I begin, I'd like to mention that we were sponsored by Adama Security, who provided the Teams infrastructure that we presented and hosted the session on. The agenda for the session is as follows. We covered risk-based alerting or risk-based responses using Splunk Phantom, presented by Tom Wise, who has been working with Phantom for a number of years now on many client sites, was one of the first in Europe to be certified by Splunk using the Phantom product, as well as being on the Splunk Trust for the past 2 years. After which there will be a panel on large-scale deployments with a round table of various panelists who have worked on various deployments in the past. This will cover the stories about the deployment, some of the mistakes that they may or may not have made in the past, and the lessons that they have learnt going forward. As I mentioned, all of our panelists on this roundtable have worked on large-scale deployments in the past, and some are currently working on multi-tenant sites, for example. And finally, as it is Global Splunk User Group Week between the 8th and 12th of February, Splunk has been raffling away $100 worth of prizes to every single user group that has presented within this week. The prize winners have been chosen from the attendees of this session already, so if you're watching this on YouTube, sadly you're not eligible. But we are happy to see you at a future event in the near future. One more thing before we get into the content, we've got a couple of house rules. It's a technical-led environment, so we do not offer sales pitches or services. It's purely for knowledge sharing and networking with other Splunk enthusiasts and customers. We do not offer products at all during the sort of session, and it's frowned upon. It's also an inclusive environment, so we follow the Berlin Code of Conduct for all of our attendees, our panelists, and ourselves, the leaders of this group. Now, without further ado, I'm going to hand myself back over to past me, who has just discovered the recording button, and I'm about to go over the Global Splunk User Group week with the attendees. So I hope you enjoy all of the panels that we have in this session.
There we go. We are now recording, so handing over to you, Andrew.
Cool. Yeah, I never find that recording button myself. Okay, so Global Splunk User Group week. So I don't know when we first got information about this, but Splunk's user group community team decided that this week, the 8th to the essentially Monday to Friday this week, although if you wanted to do a user group on both weekends, either side, it would be fine. to essentially just celebrate user groups in general and bring people together to essentially just try to get together, as well as network, discuss new ideas, and just advertise the fact that these user groups exist. So one of the advantages, or one of the reasons why you might be really interested in joining today, is the fact that Splunk themselves are going to be providing a giveaway to lucky winners of a raffle that we're going to be doing throughout the session. So Tom, can you go to the next slide? So Splunk's been kind enough to provide $100 worth of prizes. Now in the UK, obviously you have to do price conversions, so it's roughly about £71 or so the last time I checked. So we are planning to do a £50 and a £20 giveaway. Now, Splunk themselves won't allow for a cash equivalent or a gift voucher. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to decide on a prize depending on who wins, and work with Splunk to get that prize delivered to you. A number of prizes have been suggested by Splunk already. So they were suggesting some headsets, some microphones, maybe a Fire tablet, or some tile products, which essentially you attach on your items that you tend to lose, and it just pings you the location of it. And other prizes are up for grabs at Splunk's digression. So if there's something that we're not too sure if is prize-worthy, we'll email the community team and just get confirmation, because we do have to go through Splunk to get the prizes delivered to us. We also have a partnership with JetBrains as well. So we are also offering a free personal subscription to any single JetBrains product from the following list on the screen there. Personally, I would go for PyCharm because of Python, but if you're a Java person, IntelliJ, PHP Storm for people in that realm. So you should be able to just pick the option when you get the gift voucher sent to you if you win this. Next slide. So everyone who is currently on this call and has RSVP'd and checked into the event are eligible, unless you are a group leader like myself and Harry, and I think technically Tom, because you are the leader of the Northeast. Sorry, unless you're not representing them in an official way.
Tom, in fact, is the lord of the Northeast of England. I have heard this. It's got the beard for it.
And also Splunk employees are also not eligible according to their terms and conditions. There is a potential grand prize of an Oculus Quest 2, which is being sent out to 3 random user groups, although I'm not quite sure if they have been drawn yet or will be drawn in the future, because I've heard a couple of user groups are claiming that they've won it already. So it might be a case that, sadly, the grand prize can't be us, but we can hope that we will be selected for this.
And if you don't have one, I would highly recommend getting one. They're awesome.
Yeah. Giveaways will be drawn throughout the session, and we will contact you initially through the community system.
purely because we don't actually have your email addresses. There's private just to the platform, but we can select you from like the group of members and email you out through that. And the first raffle will be done after Tom, who is up next. So yeah, we will start drawing. We'll use a website called Wheel of Names, and I'll get that set up by the time Tom's finished his presentation, which should be really exciting. So I'll hand over to Tom now.
No pressure. I'll just let this next one come in through the lobby. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Tom Wise. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a solutions architect with Adama and also a Phantom expert, some would say. One of the first or the first accredited in EMEA post the Splunk acquisition, and I've been delivering professional services now for about 2 and a bit years in the Phantom space. So I've done quite a lot of different gigs for different customers, both Adama and Splunk. So today I'm going to talk to you about risk-based response. Expanding risk awareness into automation. And the reason I say that expanding it is because risk-based alerting is already kind of a thing, has been a thing for a good couple of years now in Splunk Enterprise Security that has the kind of risk framework. So this is either an expansion or it could just be on its own as well from that capability. So risk-based response is a way of using automation and known data points to better prioritize actionable events. So what we're trying to do is effectively reduce thousands to hundreds to tens potentially by kind of applying categorization based on some risk factors that are determined by ourselves, right? So as a company, you would understand what data points you're happy with, and you would be able to build this kind of risk-based response from that. So the three standard, I guess, the easy to remember categories are known bad, so we know it's definitely bad, known good, so most likely going to be false positive, probably doesn't need any action, or it can definitely go to a bottom of a queue somewhere, and then everything in the middle just kind of suspicious, right? So with the known bad, we'd want to bring that attention, the analyst attention to that event as soon as possible. So if we have some ways of without having to go through the usual full process of determining whether it's bad or good, if we already have that somehow understood or can understand that through automation, then again, it just speeds up that immediate response to something that has been deemed to be high risk. And the remediation obviously is speed up as well. So your analyst will get it straight away, knowing this is bad, and there's no kind of delay effectively, because with the automation and the points that you would have already configured, it will be able to make that determination for you. It'll end up in its own queue and then be visible to analysts to pick up. Known good, again, it's not always necessary that they're benign, but just from a risk-based perspective, it's something that we definitely don't need to jump up and down about straight away. And in some cases, if you can then also make that further determination that it's definitely false positive, either historically or based on a risk score that you're confident with, then again, it just means that there's potentially quite a large amount of events that the analyst would never even necessarily need to deal with, although I would probably recommend checking it occasionally and doing some quality analysis on the actual closed tickets as well. But once you get this thing right, as you can see there, you've got known bad being instantly escalated, if you like, to a more immediate action. Known good meaning that we all, everybody who works in sort of SOCs or any sort of ticket-based role will know that the false positives do happen, and in security there can be quite a lot, because obviously sometimes the rule might be a bit twitchy or need a little bit of refocusing, if you like. And so again, if we can programmatically determine that those are false positives, then means the analyst never even needs to see them. So they only really deal with the stuff that they actually need to deal with, rather than all of that other stuff that they just close after reading something for 20 minutes. So getting started with risk-based response, it is quite a new thing. Obviously, Phantom is, even though it's been around for a while now, it's still relatively new. And automation as a whole, this isn't something that's baked into the product. So I must kind of, highlight that this is this is my approach to it at the moment. So I have delivered this to a couple of customers now, and they are using it in their security operations. So the first step really to get you on your way is to understand all those data points and thresholds that are currently used by your analyst to determine the severity, right? So when we talked about those 3 buckets before, known good, known bad, and everything else in the middle, then there is already kind of, you should already have historical data, or at least an understanding of, the events that come into the SOC, for example, to be able to say, well, if these conditions are met, then every time so far we've closed that off as a false positive, or whenever we've seen this combination, we always raise it straight to an escalation point because we know that that's bad. And then everything else in the middle kind of just, you can do additional risk scoring with. Risk-based response data points. When I talk about data points, I'm talking about results from reputation services or from some enrichment that you have, whether it be localized enrichment, so you've got lists of stuff that you can query, whether it be Splunk, or in this case, as you can see, Virus Total or Alexa ranking. Those might be things that are important to you, either based on data you've already got or your understanding of security operations, that you can sort of write down and stipulate, well, within this threshold of positives, I'm happy that it's just suspicious, or if it's 0, I'm just going to at least give it an indication towards the risk score that it's quite a low risk. Obviously, this can be any service, any reputation, any data that you can get. It could even be local phantom data, which I'll talk about in some of the slides later, that allow you to form that entire kind of risk idea, and then you persist that risk score somewhere, and then you can use that to make that determination and update the events with all the relevant metadata, for example. So obviously an example scenario is you run a URL reputation on Virus Total, it returns a value of 0, but that URL doesn't exist in the Alexa top 1000, for example. Again, all these scenarios in here are hypothetical and generally quite sort of simplistic to get the point across. So depending on your kind of risk acceptance, I guess, and for security operations, this could just be known good because it's got positives of 0 and you're not too bothered that it's not in the Alexa top 1000 or even Alexa top whatever number it ends up being. Or it could be deemed as suspicious because even though it's a 0 positives, you may still just want someone to have a look at it. So just to get an idea of, there's a few different ways that this can be done and approached, but really it's very localized to your understanding, I guess, of what you're willing to accept as a risk, because obviously there is the chance that if you do it wrong, I guess, then there could be false positives that slip through non-false positives that slip into that false positive bucket. Obviously, with everything, the more data we have, the better informed decision we can make. So the more data points and understood thresholds. So what am I willing to accept from a Virus Total positives for IP, URL, file, all that kind of stuff? The more precise that categorization and inevitably the risk score will be, which means that confidence in that risk score process can obviously be well understood and built as well and realized. So when we talk about the enrichment and scoring, that part of the whole flow of an event lifecycle or even an automation lifecycle, the way I've implemented it is it's kind of one playbook to rule them all when it comes to enrichment and scoring only. Obviously, either side of this playbook example on the right hand side, you could still have some pre-processing stuff, and obviously on the right hand side you're going to have to interpret the risk score and then do some stuff, whether it be react to it or just raise a case or send it somewhere else, for example. But in order to make that risk score, you do need the enrichment and then interpret that enrichment in order to build and apply a final risk score. Now, when we're talking about risk scores at the moment, I am doing it on an event basis rather than an individual IOC basis or indicator basis. But I have a couple of slides at the end that sort of go into the, what the potential of this could be post this implementation. And as you can see there, it's actually one playbook that contains 5 other playbooks, right? So this is the modular capability within Phantom where this effectively, even though this one playbook contains 5 playbooks and a comment, I can just now lift and shift that into any process that I have. And I know that when it calls this playbook, it's going to run reputation on at least 4 IOCs if they're present, and then eventually accumulate all that stuff together, build a risk score, a total risk score, and then add that risk score, persist it somewhere on the event to then be used as interpretation. Now, you might be able to see, anyone who already uses Phantom, you might be able to see here that I just call all 4 playbooks at the same time, which might seem a little bit strange because I might not have a domain IOC or an IP IOC, for example. But the best practice with all Phantom playbooks is they should be able to handle any event and basically kick it out or say, no, I don't have anything to do, and then move on, because that way you allow all of these playbooks to finish properly, even if they haven't done anything. And then this score builder, if you like, will wait, because there's a join setting in Phantom, which means that this will basically now wait for all of these to complete successfully. If you didn't handle that in those playbooks, then, and one of them gets stuck, then the whole thing comes crashing down. So you need a gateway at the beginning of all these playbooks that says, do you have something I can work on? Yes. Okay, I'll go ahead, do my enrichment, add my score, and persist the score. Otherwise, no, actually, I don't have anything. And what you'll see in my demo is you'll see that we add comments into the actual event itself to say, didn't have any IP, didn't have any domain, but I did have a URL. Here's the score, and other stuff as well. And the great thing about this is this can be expanded as well. So I've obviously gone for the 4 kind of, normal IOC types, if you like, that we would want to enrich and investigate in an event. So files, URLs, domains, and IP. But, you could add user enrichment. So if you look in Active Directory, you could add email header enrichment, for example, if you're dealing with phishing events. This one playbook to rule them all is very expandable now, because once you've built this, then you can just add new playbooks, as long as they follow the best practice installed in that, all linked to this score builder, all persist their score. Then again, it's very easy to, once you've got this simple implementation, to start bolting on additional elements to give you a really proper risk view, if you like, of each event, and then obviously action, based on that risk score inside of the event. So the scoring matrix, so it's kind of what we called it. Obviously, when we implemented this at customers, and the scoring matrix is custom. So in Phantom, you have to use a custom function in order to do this, because there is obviously some Python required to do those. If this equals this, then add this score. If this is greater or less than this, add this score. If this doesn't exist, for example. So the scoring matrix, and I will show you some of the code inside of it, both in the slide and in the demo in a second as well. But there can be many approaches to this. I'm showing you a total risk score. So even though I do individual scoring on IOC types, I actually accumulate that together into a single risk score. But you can go granular, and again, I do have a couple of slides at the end where you could go to individual indicators or IOCs and have some kind of indication of its risk on there. And that might potentially save you, for example, API calls, because if it's already deemed high risk, you're not going to go and do any further enrichment, potentially. Again, this all depends on how happy you are with the implementation. So again, it is all in a custom function at the moment, or custom function inside of each playbook, but I will show you that a bit more in the demo. So just so that obviously when people look at the slides, they can sort of see what's kind of contained. Again, I have made this demo incredibly simple. I've used the free applications on Phantom, which is just, I've used MaxMind geolocation, and I've used FishTank, just check for URLs in domain in databases. So I've kept it simplistic for the demo. Obviously, in the real world, this is a lot more complex, because you might take 5 to 10 data points from each reputation call that you do in order to make this score. But just for simplicity, I've tried to sort of keep this to a really simple country location and whether something was in a database or not. It's really just that simple. Again, I'm not going to go through the code yet, because you'll see it a little bit more in the demonstration. And this is the parent playbook. So this is actually the full event processing, right? So I'll get an event in here. It's going to call my playbook, which has a load of other playbooks inside of it. So all of the enrichment and scoring. And then I retrieve the risk score from the container. And then I just have a decision which says, okay, if it's greater than this, do this. If it's less than this, do this. If it's in between, do this. And that's it. That's the playbook that basically will handle all of these events to the point of at least indicating the risk and then changing the event metadata. So it may have come in as a low severity, but based on my enrichment and scoring, I may actually end up escalating it to high severity and even potentially promoting it to a case or incident, if you like, that actually needs some actioning. So let's go to the demo, because I can talk about this for a very long time. Okay, so I have, this is my analyst queue at the moment. I'll talk very quickly through these playbooks. So here's the parent playbook. It's just, I just threw in another custom function just to show off some work that I did recently as well. But as you can see, all we've got here is a custom function that's going to check and show me all related events based on artifact matches. Then this comes into my scoring. So this playbook alone will provide my risk score. This custom function, all it actually does is retrieve me a risk score, and if it's not there, it just provides a risk score of 0. And then I have a decision here, which is probably easier to see like this, which is just the score customization. So if I, for example, wanted to change my thresholds, then at the moment, all I have is this one place to do so in this decision block. And I can now, for example, say, actually, anything 0, I don't want to accept 5 anymore as a potential false positive. So one place to kind of update it. Now, if I go into the parent one, so you can see, so this is that parent playbook. So at the beginning here, there'll be a check for basically, do you have any of the IOCs that this playbook accepts? So obviously IP addresses, domain names, hashes, URLs. You can make that list as big as you need to, because that's just a gateway into this playbook. Obviously, if it doesn't match, then I still just add a comment on the event saying nothing to process, couldn't do anything. And that will still carry on to that risk score and give it obviously a low risk score. Because there isn't any IOC, so therefore it's potentially not compromisable, right? And then we have the score builder playbook as well. So what you'll see, or what I can show you, is on each of these playbook settings, we have this synchronous option once it actually loads, which means it'll wait for that playbook to finish, because if you didn't set that, it would just run the playbook and move right to the next block, this button here. But again, all these playbooks have to run for this score builder to actually work. So I only configured the IP one, and I think I did the domain one as well, just for the purposes of the demo. And I've made it simple, again, just to kind of get the point across. So when I'm talking about playbooks being built to only handle what they can handle, otherwise they finish nicely rather than erroring out, here's my gateway. So do you have the IP addresses? Yes, great. Then I remove any of the nons. This is just something I usually do with customers because, again, you can have both source and destination. So I build a list of all of the IPs, and then I push
Sorry,
it through.
Tom, could you
Yeah.
zoom in just a little bit? The code's a little small to see, and I'm trying to,
Right.
obviously copy it verbatim into my notepad.
I'm happy to send anyone this
Perfect.
as well. It's very simple and it's company agnostic, and you don't even have to have any new integrations. Great. So then what I do is just some phantomy stuff to present it as a list, and then I push every IP address through geolocate, and here's the scoring matrix. So I'll talk through this very briefly because, again, this provides you a structure of understanding if you want to implement it yourself. But as you can see, it is, well, as you will see, it is quite simplistic because all I'm actually doing here is from the geolocate data, which I'm pulling in back here. So the original IP I pass in, I'm getting the continent name, and I'm also getting the country name as an output for each IP address. I get some stuff here just to get the playbook info. And then I get the user ID and the container ID. And then what I do here, you can see if the result 1, so in this case, the first result, second result, which is the continent name, is Europe or North America, because that's where my offices are. Again, hypothetical situation. Then I'm going to add a 0 to the risk score if it's Europe, but North America has sometimes been a bit dodgy, so I'm going to add a 1 just as a, just to raise it up a little bit if they're from North America. And then anything else, then I'm going to add the higher risk score because it's not an office location I'm aware of, so I shouldn't have anything related to that. Again, this is purely hypothetical, so there may be holes in my scenario, but again, I'll stick with it for now. And then what you can also do, and this just shows you can then go a little bit deeper as well. So I've done an initial kind of risk sweep here, if you like, but then additionally, if it's not from the countries that's within those continents, so France or United States, then I also want to add an additional risk score, because even though it's in the same continent, it's not in the right country. Again, very simplistic. This isn't how it would look or how you would do your risk in the real world. It would generally be based on positives of, the reputation service, or how many times you've seen this event in a certain state, or, user might even be on a watch list or due to leave, so there is literally, you can exchange this kind of idea with anything you want, but I'm just trying to show you that you can go quite granular if you do so wish. In Phantom as well, I just do some debug statements so that when it's running, if anyone's testing it, they can see. And then here's the bit where I persist the score. So again, moving data between playbooks in Phantom at the moment isn't sort of generic. You do have to kind of save it and then retrieve it. So here what I do is at the end, when I've calculated the full score, I basically save it as an object, which is only against this container as well. So no other container would be able to get this information. And then that is now saved, right? So that's effectively the end of the playbook. I do some stuff here which just basically checks if there was any failures in the geolocate IP, because additionally I could have brought that even into the scoring matrix and said if there was a failure, added a little bit of a risk score just to kind of indicate that, you know, I wasn't able to give you a real answer, so maybe just check it out or raise it to the top. But I just do some success. If it is, I tag it as a success. Otherwise, it's a fail. So that's that IP playbook which sits just here. And then the score builder, which I didn't actually get ready for you, of course. And the score builder playbook is literally just, come on. Apologies, takes its time.
Get praying to those demo gods, Tom.
Yeah, no, yeah, I should have done it. I thought I had all the tabs lined up too. I thought I was really on point tonight. But anyway, so as you can see, it's literally just one function because this playbook isn't expecting any inputs. It's just gathering stuff that should have already been saved. It's just one block, which all it does here is it goes and gets the scores. Obviously, again, they might be empty because they might not have run through the playbook at all. And then I just basically get all the scores here and then squish them together and make it into a final risk score. And then I post that risk score back to my container where I have a custom field called risk score. And then the parent playbook here will take that risk score. So I have to retrieve it again via custom code. Sorry for anyone who doesn't like custom code. And then I then can use that value inside of this decision. Okay. So enough talking, let's see how it works. So what I've got here is I've got a generator app, which is just going to generate me as many containers full of some almost randomized IP addresses, URLs, etc. But I do have this parent playbook set to active, right? Now, what that means is that as soon as I create these events, they're going to be thrown straight through to this playbook. And you're going to see that some of them will be closed off and low priority. Some of them will be assigned to the incident commander as a medium priority. And some of them will even be promoted to a case if I have any high scores. So let's see how that actually looks. How am I doing for time, guys? Is anyone? I should have kept track of it myself.
Perfectly fine, Tom. You've got at least another 10-15 minutes if you need it.
Cool. All right. So let's just do 15, for example, here. Just do that again. And if I go quickly into the analyst queue, it should auto update, but it's, as you've seen, been a little bit slow today. And I mean, this literally takes about 20 seconds, and those 15 events will have already been scored and processed. So I've said that now. It's still reading. As soon as those events are created, within about 20 to 30 seconds, if not less, they will all have been processed. This is where my Phantom instance now dies. I have got ones I can show you earlier, as long as the UI is still there. Dead space. Again, this was working fine before, so yeah, demo gods have definitely come down on me now. Okay, it's still adding to container. So while I'm talking about this, as you can see here, right, is that we've got, these are some of the ones that I ran a bit earlier before the demo. So I have definitely tested this and it does definitely work. You can see here, I've got the medium ones were assigned to incident commander. If I go into my cases, here we go. Maybe I've got too many things open. Okay, so it's actually added those containers now. So if that should refresh, but again, it's a bit slow. I was hoping to wow you all with the speed, but it seems like my laptop's having other ideas.
It's okay. I think the tagline of Phantom is Phantom, compute sold separately.
Yes, it is very intensive. I'm just worried that I might have filled up my database on this dev instance. So it did create the events. That's a good start. Okay, I'm going to give this a little bit longer, but so what you can see here is the stuff that it's already done, right? So, for example, all the medium ones will be assigned to the incident commander. This is just one that slipped through, but also you can see I've done quite a lot of tagging on there. So, for example, if it's been IP enriched, if it was a high risk, then it would have actually ended up in the cases queue here. But because I've stipulated open. Right, so here's one that I did earlier, for example. So let me show you how it looks inside of an event, and then I'll move on to the slides because that will definitely work. He says. So here's a phantom event. So you can see here that the risk score field. Oh, okay, this is fun. Thanks, phantom. Sorry, dead space. This isn't even relying on my connection, so something's dying. So I just wanted to show you how it looks inside the actual event, and then I've just got a couple of slides just to finish it off about kind of some tips to get started and other considerations as well. So here, look, I have the risk score, which is quite high, as you can see, 455. I believe I actually added that in when I bulk closed them, so it probably was over 20, I think. But if I look in the activity pane here, I can see the parent one kicked off. All of my other enrichment playbooks kicked off, but there was no file hashes in the event. There was an IP or was IPs, and it scored at 15. The URL risk score was 10. The final score was 25. And then I've added a comment saying it's been deemed to be high risk, and you can see it was instantly promoted to a case. So again, in a SOC, if you're looking in the case queue, which is this really needs working on, then this took from, I think it did that at 321. Yeah, so it didn't take very long at all to actually basically get this moved across, and that was only because I ran it manually too. The whole process literally took on the automation itself about 30 seconds once it was all working. But let's get back to the slides because I'm fed up of seeing my phantom try to load. He says as the slides take ages to load into.
Tom, this is where you realise that you've accidentally left your Phantom connected to an Office 365 tenant, and you've just brought down an Office 365 instance.
Yeah, no comment. No comment. Come on.
Well, while that's waiting to load, I used to use a Chrome extension that helped with the suspending of tabs called the Great Suspender, and it would automatically put to sleep tabs that you didn't use for a while so they didn't eat up your RAM. I then got an alert from Chrome the other day, from Google, I should say, saying we've just removed some malware from your browser. And somebody had purchased the developer account who'd created that add-on that it was installed in like 250,000 odd users, and they'd inserted some screen scraping malware that had been, of course, automatically updated because you've got to keep those extensions up to date automatically. So I was glad for Google's overzealous, overprotective walled garden at that point, considering, yeah, not ideal.
Yeah, the only browser extensions I use is usually a JSON formatter with using Phantom quite a lot and doing a lot of REST stuff. I've got a JSON formatter and then just some other small bits and bobs. Okay, so this is loading slowly. Oh, it's not my internet. Maybe the wife's jumped on the Quest 2. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. Well, the kids are playing Fortnite. Right, here we go. So let me get past the demo bit. That was way too much of a jump. Thank you. I knew I should have downloaded them. Right, here we go. What's next? Okay, so I talked about doing risk based on the entirety of the event, right? And only applying that risk score value to an event. I did just press present. Is it just taking its time? There we go. But of course, again, you can persist that information on an indicator level. So in Phantom, there is this idea of an indicators view. Just loading up. Why did it start there? And that is basically a deduplicated list of all of the indicators that come into Phantom. Now, inside of that, there's not really anywhere at the moment to persist much information. I have put an ideas request in to have some sort of risk score or some element on side that indicator, but at the moment it does have the ability to tag those indicators. And what the indicators view is really good at is that it gives you a view of that indicator spread across your entire environment. So if it's obviously one indicator, but you might have a load of events that have that same indicator in, but the indicators view will give you the view, okay, you have this IP address, but it's actually in these 20, 30, or even 1,000 events. And with some of the information that you can get back from that, sorry, I'm just flipping through the slides, you can actually then use that as your risk point, if you like, because again, if, for example, you're spending a lot on your APIs, so you're querying VirusTotal thousands of times a day, and sometimes for the same items, then if you can classify that indicator before you even need to go off and enrich, and it's already high risk or extremely low risk, then you can save yourself an API call, because you know, depending on your confidence of that scoring or determination on the indicator, you can now save yourself potentially a good bit of API usage in general. So there are some REST endpoints for the indicator, and I'll just briefly cover them. The documents link is on the page here, should you really wish to take a look. And Phantom REST is extremely efficient, expandable, and because it has Django querying, you can do a lot of really cool filtering as well. But I won't go into that too much because I do love REST. I need a I love REST t-shirt. So the REST indicator endpoint will give you a list of all of the indicators. Again, remember it's deduplicated though. So even if you've got an IP address and 1,000 events, you'll only see one element in the indicators view. And it gives you a lot of information such as how many open events have that indicator in, when was it last seen? So was it recently or was it a year ago, for example, we last saw it on the event. It will also give you a list of the breakdown of all of the events. So if you've got 10 events, you might have 3 of them in high severity, 6 of them in medium severity, and 1 of them in low severity. And it will show you that. And that can be used again to kind of provide a potential scoring context. Indicator artifact will bring up all of the artifacts that contain that value, because remember, an artifact can contain multiple key value pairs. So even though you may be looking for this IP address, inside of that same artifact, you may actually find additional contextual information, because you might find that a matching event also has this additional IP address or something else. And then the common container, indicator common container one, is very simple. It just shows you the container IDs and container titles that actually have that indicator in. So not very useful in my opinion at the moment, but hopefully that may get expanded on a little bit more. This is just what it looks like when you go to the REST indicator location. And this is what I was talking about, how you can now use these data points potentially as a risk score calculation, if you like. One of my ideas was to have an automated action that kicks off every 15 minutes to an hour, looks at this data on the actual individual indicator, and then tags it with either high risk, low risk, medium risk. So that's before we've even done any reputation. And that would allow you kind of 2 places then. So you would have reputation scores that you could add to the existing sort of determination, if you like, on an indicator. And again, mainly just for people downloading the slides afterwards, I've tried to just expand on the right how you might be able to use these, the fact that you potentially be able to save on API calls, because you can make a determination, do I even want to check the reputation of this, because I'm pretty sure I already know it's bad, already know it's good, for example. And it's just another way of adding another feather into the risk-based response cap, if you like, because you're now doing stuff that the system already has data on. You don't need to go external, and then you can add that into any external reputation service data that you get back. Just some useful tips again. Obviously, as with all things Phantom, planning and understanding your spread or landscape is incredibly essential because of its power, right? So if you miss something or don't understand something and put something in based on an assumption, then with the automation and how fast it can do things, you can get bogged down pretty quickly with errors or other pains. So again, review the documentation for the apps, because they have all of the outputs from your action. So it'll tell you if you put an IP address in, Virus Total will get you these 150 data points, and you can work out which ones are valuable to yourself. Understand your scoring options or the expected result. So again, based on Virus Total positives, am I willing to accept that up to 5 is probably low risk, or do I just want to, no, 0 is low risk, anything above is anything else? And then thresholds as well. So at what point are we willing to false positive or raise it? And then what's the middle ground? When we first implement this, it's sometimes good to put in maybe a final checkpoint. Again, it depends on your volumes, because if you're getting a lot of events, you know, if you prompt someone for every event saying, is this right? Then you're probably going to get some complaints. But if you are a little bit twitchy, or you just want to monitor it at first, you can put some prompts in, and it'll, for example, a prompt will come out to an incident commander, for example, and say, this event has been deemed to have this risk score, was Phantom right? And then over time, you can sort of remove that prompt once you get confident with the automation. And of course, best practice, best practice, best practice. Whenever you build new enrichment playbooks to add into this risk-based response, then just follow those best practice where they will always run against any data, but then if it can't do anything, it will still just go straight to the end and finish and allow that scoring playbook to then retrieve all of the scores. So that's me really for that. I know that was a really flyby tour of risk-based response, and anyone who hasn't sort of done too much phantomy stuff, that's probably a little bit whew. So I do apologize, but this is kind of, I believe this is the way that we're going to be going with phantom and automation, because you know the sheer volume of alerts right now, we really need to categorize them better before we take action. Otherwise, you know, your analyst just becomes sick of always dealing with false positives. So that's me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Inside the Teams window you're in, there should be in the top right a hand icon. If you press that, and I will call your name just to ask a verbal question, or if you want to type one in the chat, feel free. Now is your time for any questions for Tom. Tom, you might be getting away with it. Oh, we have one from Stuart. Stuart, feel free to come off mute and ask your question.
Hey, Tom, thank you for showing this approach. It's definitely interesting. What, if you could talk about, like, what are some of the like net effects or net impact you've seen where this has been put in? Like, have they seen fewer alerts? Are the analysts able to get like more accurate one? Like, what have you kind of seen come out of this?
Yeah, so we've seen a few iterations. Obviously, in one customer, we're kind of on the V2 of this. We delivered an MVP initially, and because of the gains that they saw, and I mean, I don't mean gains, actually, you know, like their analyst load in general was much less. Not only because of the enrichment, but that risk score really gave the analyst a lot more an indication of, you know, I now need to jump up and do something with this. As for false positives, we saw a drastic reduction in false positive determination by the analysts. Because effectively, you know, to a pretty good degree, even in the first MVP, you know, we were able to siphon off quite a lot of those. Yeah, we don't need to work on those. There was a process, obviously, where we would randomly QA some of those just to make sure that it was correct. But most places will have a good understanding of this is definitely a false positive, and you can code that into Phantom. And yeah, we saw massive gains, if you like, not only in the speed of getting the really bad stuff fixed quicker because it just raised to the top straight away, but also that kind of, you know, the analyst getting a bit of a reprieve, if you like, from all of the non-security related events that can come into a SOC.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? Okay.
Yes,
well,
got one. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. Really good presentation. Really interesting.
I think there's one in the text chat. Just
oh, sorry, that hadn't popped up for me. Apologies. So from Daniel, what do you think about the risk-based alerting in Splunk and interaction with Phantom? And by that, I'm assuming you mean Splunk Enterprise Security.
Yeah, let me just, did I find my unmute button? Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Right. Sorry, my mute button was delayed. So Splunk Enterprise Security, has a risk-based alerting in there, right? So the risk-based alerting is more that initial funnel, right? Because that is the alerting side. So it should already reduce potential false positives coming through, because it's no longer on a per event basis. It's more on a risk anomaly. You know, when something flags up or if a certain thing now breaches thresholds, then the alert gets fired out for response. So this can be used in tandem with it, and obviously will really, you know, when you've got those two things working together, then not only are you only sending the alerts that really mean something, but additionally, if anything gets through that, you know, is actually not quite what the alert thought, then the risk-based response will also help that and feed that loop as well, right? So if you've got risk-based alerting in Splunk Enterprise Security, and you're still getting a lot of false positives with your risk-based response in Phantom, then it's obvious that your risk-based alerting is maybe still a little bit too twitchy, and you know you need to refine that rules a bit. So I think, yeah, it can work both in tandem and autonomously of it, because you could just throw all of your events at Phantom, and again, you would hope that those false positives based on your data points will never touch an analyst anyway. But of course, if you use them in tandem, then that's obviously, in my opinion, that is a perfect storm, because you are potentially reducing thousands of incidents to tens of incidents, potentially. Star.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tom. And I think from my point of view, and I'm coming at this from a Splunk Enterprise ES SME, not Phantom, and I would say that almost like from an information theory perspective, the earlier you can apply filters to your funnel, the better it is. The key balance is the appropriate filter, and do you have enough context to apply it? And RBA is a fantastic filter. The earlier you can apply it, as long as it's high quality, I would say the better you are. So, you could also have various layers. You can also have Phantom calling into Splunk ES to update risk modifiers as well. So, for example, let's say you're able to pull in some contextual information for a detective controller, an alert within ES, and apply RBA based on that context. That's really powerful. But perhaps you don't have access to all the contextual information. Some of it might be stateful that you have to query over the API to draw back in. That's where something like Phantom is really powerful. If it's static-ish information or information that's updated in batch, well, then that's what Splunk Enterprise is built for. Just put it into an index, a summary index, a lookup, the KV store, whatever, query that at time, during your alert firing, and then use RBA if appropriate. But if it's a just-in-time piece of contextual information or a piece of information that you have to apply a query to an external API or system, then Phantom's brilliant, because of course that's what it's built to do. And within its state machine, it can go, hold, I'm going to go check, I'm going to update on the fly as all this context comes in, and then adjust that risk modifier. So not only can it adjust the case, the case in Phantom's risk score, it can also then go back into Splunk and say, by the way, remember that asset? It's actually much more dangerous than we thought. Next time you see an alert for it, it come through with a higher modifier straight off the bat. And so you end up with this brilliant virtuous circle with both systems improving the fidelity of the detection as it goes through.
Yeah, very good point indeed. Yeah.
And one final question for Tom, if there are any. And if not, we'll move straight into our next session. Okay, just check the chat as I'm not getting notifications. Brilliant. And Daniel, you are welcome. And thanks again to Tom. So, Tom, if you don't mind continuing to drive, that would be super helpful. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, so hopefully I've got everyone's names on here already. Do you mind just clicking for the little animation's sake? Woo!
Oh yeah.
I mean, this isn't how we're going to do the raffle. We're going to actually use a proper website. So I'm just going to grab my web browser, and I will accept. My Mac doesn't want to share it. That's great. But let's just come back to that at the end of the session. Let's just
No
move
problem,
everything
Andrew.
yeah.
No problem. Next slide then, please, Tom. Okay. large-scale Splunk deployments, medium-scale Splunk deployments. Maybe it's going to be our own lab environment, but we're now going to be joined with myself chairing into a roundtable. I expect it to not go on more than 45 minutes, and we will have some time for questions. But I should, touch wood, press the next slide, please, Tom. Be joined by... Oh, yeah, good point. Don't worry, Tom, I don't need the slide. I can just read it. But yeah, we are recording this session. Just a reminder to everybody, both sharing and asking questions, that it is recorded. As everyone, despite our best efforts, is from Adama here. Just a friendly reminder that absolutely no customer names or identifying information can be shared. And same when you ask your Q&As, I suggest not identifying, anything that you think is sensitive. But, other than that, we'll be sharing openly and honestly the technical challenges and how we've gone about it. But yeah, no CII, please. So Idris, Ilyas, Taran, and Tomasz, you all with us? And Tom, you can stop sharing the screen and then you can see our wonderful faces. That's okay. Hello.
Hiya.
Hey.
Okay, Ilyas, Tomasz, check. Do we have the other panelists? Are you here? Hey, Taran, you're muted, just in case you didn't know.
Evening.
Evening, brilliant to have you. And Idris, are you here too? Maybe not. Well, anyway, we will kick off as there's more than enough of us to fill a round table. So thank you all for joining me and taking me up on the ask to come and say hello. What I'll ask first of all is just a 15-20 second introduction of who you are, what you do, and then I'll open with a short, I promise, story, and then really it's chip in whenever you want. So I'll go to Tomasz.
Okay. I was not expecting that, but okay.
Just for an introduction first.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yes, I'm Tomasz. I did a lot of some consulting work with my first years in Adama, and then I moved sort of into the engineering space, and now I do software development, and some of that is still Splunk and Phantom focused, with some integrations and apps and whatnot.
Okay, Taran, go for it.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Taran Rathor. I started off with Adama roughly about 2 years ago as a security engineer and recently promoted up to a security consultant. My work mostly with Adama has been with customers, so managed services, and my main focus has been Splunk Enterprise.
Brilliant, thanks, Taran. Ilyas.
Hi all. So I'm currently an engineering lead in Adama. I've been working for the last year implementing our SOAR technology Phantom within our MSSP. But in the past, I've consulted for Splunk Core, and I've also co-presented with Harry and Tomasz to DocConf about basically an RTL CI/CD. Oh, there he goes. CI/CD around deploying Splunk. So that's me.
Great, thanks, Ilyas. And I forgot to mention, but Andrew and Tom, obviously, you're both more than welcome to chip in later on when we're sharing stories. As we get to Q&A, anyone else is as well. So in the interest of setting an open story that shows possibly just a tiny bit of vulnerability, I'll start by sharing how I spent, must have been 5 days on a customer site quite early into my Splunk career, one of my first multi-site deployments. And I arrived on site to be told by the organization who just kind of spun up a digital practice to launch a new digital campaign transformation program that was quite side from the rest of the organization. And they had procured enterprise security. to help them protect this new environment. Like, yep, sounds like a sensible idea. They were looking for some of their, out of the box content to be relatively, let's bring data in, click on, and now we can say we've got protection. So, not the most mature customer, but, they brought us in, so they made a good choice. Day one, after, the kind of standard things you ask for, like, for example, could I please have, an HLD, an LLD, bearing in mind the equipment had already been procured. I was there to implement, not to design. I had been told it would be a multi-site cluster. So already I'm thinking, this will be a fair few servers, must be quite a high amount of ingest. Then I discovered their license was 2 gigabytes of data per day, and they had procured Splunk Enterprise and Splunk Enterprise Security. I'm not entirely sure how this got through the Splunk sales organization, because that typically wouldn't easily be greenlit. But regardless, that is what they had purchased. And because of the size of the data that was perceived to go in, they had also spec'd their boxes that they had procured from a, let's call them a legacy public cloud provider. So none of the big names that come to mind, but one that rebadged their data center as cloud, but without any of the nice infrastructure as code or PaaS, SaaS, etc. And they had provisioned virtual machines with 2 cores and 2 gigabytes of RAM for the 12 servers that were going to be supporting this cluster. Now, anyone that has implemented enterprise security will know that regardless of the amount of data going in, that you will need a certain quantity of compute to deal with things like data model acceleration, and indeed the even just the saved searches that are going to run against it. Bearing in mind that a single Splunk search, as we know, takes roughly 1.5 threads on a CPU to execute if you include distributing down to the OS layer and everything else, and that's a conservative estimate. So their aspiration of 40 implemented security detection controls was not looking likely. Anyway, the story of, or is where my mistake happened, was I bootstrapped the cluster as I'm told. I made some early recommendations about specifications and that they were going to blow through the license in days and so on. These were taken on the chin by the project manager, and they were taken away out of my scope. So I needed to deliver on this platform. So I built my first multi-site cluster. Now, this was relatively early when multi-site clustering wasn't that common, or at least not to the people I'd spoken to. And in the latest release, there'd been some updates to the configuration stanza, and I didn't know that. Nor did I truly understand the documentation as well as I should have. So I set up this 3-site multi-site cluster. And when it comes to a normal cluster, you set 2 types of replication. There's replication of the searchable data, and there's replication of the raw data. And when it's a multi-site cluster, originally in the docs it said those settings are not persistent and are overridden by the multi-site cluster settings. Basically, in a multi-site cluster, you say per site, I want a certain amount of searchable data versus raw data, not per index. Per index. So I set the multi-site settings, and because this was a 2 cluster per site setting, it was 2 and 2 for every single one. So not how it should be set up. And as we all know, a cluster should be 3 minimum per site, and there's a good reason for that. What wasn't apparent to me until 18 hours awake in my hotel room, close to tears, over my MacBook Pro, as I ran the 12 VMs, not containers, VMs, on my local Mac that I had to build out the entire environment locally just to try and fix this problem. After 4 days of not getting the cluster to come up, I found that the Splunk docs were incorrect, and in fact, it still inherited the minimum default values of the local cluster settings, which say a minimum of 3 nodes for searchable data. For raw data. So because my 2 per site cluster had not met that, it wouldn't come up. So I troubleshooted everything, the TLS certs, the SAML configuration. I just couldn't figure it out, and the errors were awful. I was engaging with Splunk Professional Services. They had no insight because, funnily enough, virtually none of them had ever tried to set up a 2-indexer per site multi-site cluster. Try saying that quickly. And so, yeah, so at 4 a.m., I think it was, on a Friday morning, after just taking a cold shower to try and refresh my brain, I suddenly went, well, wait a minute. What if let me just increase it to the recommended 3 per site on my VMs? It came straight up. You cannot imagine the sense of relief and anguish I felt when I realized that not only did I have to go into the customer the next day at 8 a.m., so 4 hours from then, but I also had to explain to them that it was because I had, let's say, understandably ignored some of the configuration because I thought it would be overridden. So that is my war story, and I learned lessons like sleep and, involve others, and never ever try and, I should have walked away from that site and said, you're not ready, let's do this properly. But instead I kind of just persevered and didn't push back. So yeah, and I see Jonathan has got his hand up, so I'll assume that's a question for me. Do you want to go, Jonathan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can indeed.
Great, a good start. So this is more a philosophical question about indexer clustering and the power of Splunk as opposed to other lesser big data products. So
is this question going to get me
currently, No, not at all. So we currently are on-prem primarily. We do have a bit of cloud stuff. And we have an indexer cluster, multi-site indexer cluster, where we have site replication. So we could lose an entire data center. Now we're being asked to move into the cloud. It's inevitable. We know the direction of the wind. And
we have lost you if you're still there. Or I'm saying we. I'm hoping it's not just me.
No, yeah. Wow. It is we.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but unfortunately I can't hear you. Well, I'll tell you what, again, we'll definitely want to come back to that question if, Jonathan, if your comms comes back. So let me know via the chat and we'll always pause and take it back up. But what I will do now is hand over to someone else on the table. Who would like to go next? Tomasz, would you like to go next?
Well, Harry, I'm thinking I want to follow your act.
Almost crying in the shower at 4 a.m. It's it is hard to beat.
But so eloquently put, though. All right. Fair enough. So what I wanted to talk about, I guess, was dealing with large financial organizations, which I know some of you might work for large financial organizations, and some of you may have worked with large financial organizations. And this is not a complaint. It's just I want to discuss some of the peculiarities of the industry, which I see Ilya smiling there. I'm not sure if that's related. So
maybe.
one of my first engagements that I did with Adharma, I was sent on site as a consultant to do an implementation in a bank, and I think, and it's not even financial organizations, it's where we work, I guess. And I wanted to give you my perspective as someone who came into tech, kind of wide-eyed and thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna go see what a proper infrastructure looks like, what kind of issues that I'm going to be solving for these organizations. And I think I was surprised because what ended up happening is I was deploying Splunk. I was essentially trying to deploy universal forwarders across the estate, and the issues I ran into were quite strange for me, because it was issues like routing, for example. So I prepared this beautiful package, or so I thought, with great config, and I said, okay, just deploy this and we'll be fine. And finally, we got through the IT, we got through the red tape, and we deployed it across the entire estate. It was like 1,600 universal forwarders. And there I am sitting with the rest of the project team, and I'm like, here we go. You're going to start seeing them coming online very, very soon. No worries. And about 5 minutes later, we had like 60 hosts connected. And then 10 minutes later, it was like 100, and then 160. And I was kind of starting to panic there, because I'm like, oh my God, I just used up all this time and everyone's effort to deploy 1,600 packages. Where are all my hosts? And as I started to debug this issue, as I started to dive into it, it turned out that a majority of hosts hadn't connected due to a routing issue somewhere on the network. And I was quite panicked at that point. So I understandably had a sigh of relief as I realized that it wasn't actually per se my mistake, although potentially lessons learned. I do now like to ask the customer whether or not there's any issues like that I should be aware of, or potentially even sample some hosts. But I had a sigh of relief as I realized that it was just a routing issue and not my whole configuration that was broken. And to be fair, we did resolve this issue over time. Obviously, it can take a while to access 1,600 hosts and diagnose all the various different issues that can be affecting them. But fortunately, at the end, I was able to prevail and get all those hosts online and get data forwarding for the entire organization. But I think that was a real eye-opener to industry in general for me at that point, when I realized that we still deal with really basic issues. It's not like we walk into places and everything is perfectly set up and there we are, trying to implement something perfect. It's about troubleshooting, and it's about thinking on your feet and trying to identify problems.
Yeah, definitely. IT hygiene is definitely the biggest, other than the provisioning of equipment, which I guess you could also call IT hygiene of a sort, is definitely been the biggest delay I've experienced on site. I wouldn't spent 3 weeks literally sitting on site with somebody paying, I'm sure, exorbitant fees for my time. Obviously not good value, because they couldn't get me access. And it had been in the works for 3 months, and they'd put the requests in, but something wasn't quite working as intended, to the point that it was costing that organization money and huge amounts of frustration. It's such a shame when you're there to, if you believe that I do, that technology can help solve problems. It's not the savior to problems, but I want to help solve some problems, but I can't log in, or I don't have SSH access, or you've under provisioned your hosts. It's very frustrating. Taryn, how do you feel about sharing a story?
Yeah, so I'll share a story of mine. So this was a story from my first engagement with the Dharma. So I was just freshly qualified as Splunk admin onto my first engagement on site with the customer. And basically I had to deploy a custom app to some Windows logs for our universal forwarders for the customer. For this particular subnet, there was roughly about 100 hosts. So obviously there was a bit of nerves there. I wanted to get the app perfect, wanted it to deploy perfectly. So I did my stanza to pick up the correct clients. I did a very accurate IP subnet. Everything was in place. And I guess at this time, I didn't think to stay calm. I think it was because it was one of the first tasks. I wanted to get it done and just quickly over with. So, so what I did was I loaded my app onto the deployment server, and I shipped it out to my clients. And I waited only about a minute because I thought it would happen a lot faster. I thought the logs would come in a lot quicker into our index. So my mistake was that I decided to remove the app from the client, so via the deployment server configuration, and reload it again. And with this, what ended up happening was there was a total of about, out of the 100, 99 hosts were sending logs except for one. And I'm just at this point very confused. So I checked the app on the deployment server. I was looking at the internal logs. I could see that all clients had actually installed the app successfully. And I'm just scratching my head. I can't figure out why the customer. They were very involved with all the work I'd done. So about every 10 minutes, I was getting asked, are we getting anything? Are we getting anything? And I was like, no, I'm still checking internal index and such. And it turned out, so obviously it was a bit hard to diagnose because all these universal forwarders were managed by a third party. So I didn't have direct command line access to these. But it turned out my actions of quickly removing and redeploying the app actually corrupted the app on that one single universal forwarder. For some reason, the outputs.conf was just gibberish, and it was the most, I haven't seen anything like it till this day. And it was just a simple case of I manually decided to just add the app to that universal forwarder, and it was fixed. But it took me about an entire day to figure out that was the problem. But yes, that was very scary. Consider it was my first week with the customer. And I guess lessons learned is stay calm, take your time, don't rush any configurations, especially in a production environment, which was, again, my mistake. So yeah, that's my story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's the one thing you don't think of. Well, of course, it's going to get deployed in an uncorrupted state. I mean, what kind of software would randomly bit switch and end up with completely mangled payload? But happens. Yeah, fascinating. I always made the mistake when I used to deploy apps of forgetting to tick requires restart, and I'd deploy it to all the hosts, then click requires restart, but that wouldn't trigger a redeployment because the hash of the app hadn't changed, just that one switch, and that wouldn't trigger a redeployment. So I then have to go into the conf file, like delete a character, replace a character, add a space, save, reload config, redeploy. It's working. It's like, what was wrong for the last 3 days? Oh, I was really complex root cause analysis. Yeah, it totally wasn't that.
I think we've all been there, yeah. And it's the most frustrating when you don't realize what's wrong, because you start looking at all the various things that could have happened or not happened, and you just never think to that it restart, because that checkbox, it looks like it's going to do it.
Yeah, and you kind of you get why it defaults to being disabled, but when for most UFs, most apps, that it's going to need a restart, you kind of like, it would be nice just to have a prompt. You've just installed a new app. Would you like to enable restart? Yes, I would.
And that is quite interesting, actually, because a UF is not a lossy device, right? It usually retains logs, so a restart is usually not a lossy operation. I guess the distinction there is it's difficult to have that checkbox enabled only for universal forwarder, because the deployment server is obviously not entirely clear on what it's deploying to.
Yeah, and I guess the question there is, as you said, most UFs aren't, but for the ones that are, and it defaults, then there's suddenly a Splunk support ticket saying you just made me lose all this data by enforcing a default. Yeah, totally.
And especially if it rolls to a heavy, right? Because if it rolls to a heavy forwarder is doing pull operations, then you're actually looking at potential loss of data.
Those heavies, problematic. Elias, we are going to move on to you shortly, although I believe there is a question from Billy. Billy, feel free to come off mute and ask your question, if you'd like. If not, you're also more than welcome to type it out, or we can cover them at the end. Okay. Well, if you do want to speak, just re-put your hand up, and we will do our best.
Right, sorry, sorry, it's Jonathan here.
Oh,
I was using my computer completely crashed, so I'm using my daughter's laptop, and my daughter's called Billy. Sorry. It's maybe moved on a lot, but I was in the middle of asking about indexer clusters.
Yeah, no, please go back to it. No, we were all kind of like really interested, and then suddenly decided.
Right. yeah, my computer completely crapped out, so apologies. So we want, there's talk of putting SIM products in the cloud, which are not Splunk. Now, that's fair enough, but I think what we're going to miss is the, and I don't know if I'm using the right term, the federated search capabilities of Splunk. So, when you run a search from a search head, it broadcasts that search to all the indexes, and the indexes are little autonomous, semi-intelligent agents. They've got a Bloom filter on the tarballs. They will go in, they'll extract just the data if they've got the primary copy of it, and then they will pass that data down. So one of the things we're told is the data that is made in the cloud shall not leave the cloud. In general, in other words, we're not going to pipe everything, every event that we're going to keep as much, but it is so cool, the fact that you can launch this search that retrieves just the data you want. Now, the other option we're being sort of presented with is to have some other SIM in the cloud, and that does the correlation, does the finding the bad stuff and then sending the alerts, just the alerts down, potentially into Splunk or maybe into some kind of SOAR product. Now, the use case that I'm presenting, which makes that a bad choice, is let's say you've got a user who's trying to exfil clients. So he's got my confidential client.doc. It's in the cloud. He brings it on-prem. He brings it down. He tries to put it on a USB stick. It doesn't work. He tries to email it out. He tries to use the web to, some website that's got the ability to launch files. Now, you're not going to get that single pane of glass type experience if you have a non-Splunk SIM in the cloud, or would you? Like where I'm going is we cannot deliver that functionality unless you have the same big data product that allows some kind of federated search. Now, that's my sort of initial starting point, but I want to be totally sure because we do not want site replication across clouds because that will, obviously that's going down expensive pipes. So we want in our data center 1, data center 2 on-prem, we want complete replication of data, with a replication factor of 2 so that we can lose. But in the cloud, we would probably want separate regional-based data centers, so US East, US West, that behaves like that. So in other words, across the cloud, we could lose one site, but not that relationship on-prem. Does this make sense to you?
It does, and it sounds like something I could spend 2 hours with this group of people talking about. So I'll try to unpack it as briefly as I can, and then welcome the rest of the round table to comment as well. So I'm going to work backwards for a second. So, and this is entirely possibly based on my own ignorance. So please, those that are more technical, correct me. So within public cloud, you've often got the idea of regions versus availability zones. So availability zones would be data centers, and regions would be groups of data centers with the same features, so to speak. So you could achieve multi-site within a single region, but it's actually spread across 2 or more data centers. So you'd achieve the same outcome, but not pay for multi-region ingress and egress and ingress. But I think to your broader point, which is around like cloud native tooling versus centralized, big data, so to speak, I think that your premise is fundamentally accurate in that the big narrative around big data is unsiloed data if you want to get those mature, high fidelity detections. If you want to try and correlate disparate data sources, like your example, they have to be within the same data plane or accessible to that plane. So either it's in Splunk, or Splunk can talk to something, pull the results back, and then correlate them.
Just to interject, we have a product that we've developed that uses the Azure API, and it's like a custom command. So you can actually grab the data from Azure and bring it back in kind of seamlessly. The disadvantage is that there's no granular permissions on that. It's basically you have to permission your Splunk service account to have access to whatever it needs. So that kind of didn't. But I think the fundamental paradigm or problem that is the MapReduce idea of broadcasting your search and having just those agents return the data. And to my knowledge, Splunk does not allow you to speak to any other big data products in that way, and neither do the other big data products allow you to speak to Splunk in that way. And because that's probably their Splunk secret sauce, they don't want that to happen. Maybe.
It kind of
go for it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention that it's not entirely true that it doesn't hook. For instance, you can connect to Hadoop, but that's because Splunk already uses Hadoop on their proprietary software, as far as I know, or they just fork Hadoop in some way. But they can definitely talk with other MapReduce distributed systems.
Yeah, I think the key is what triggers the native MapReduce or similar data functions. So when you engage the Splunk API to a Splunk search head and ask it a query, that search head isn't going to treat that query differently to a native query that it's created. So it's still going to distribute that search down to indexes. They're going to run MapReduce and transformative functions that they're allowed to before aggregating that up to the search head, which will respond to the API call. So you still got that benefit, which is one of a few big data scaling features or functions that allows you to do that big data. I don't know how the others work. So I don't know how Sentinel or any of the cloud native big data tools, if they have the same capability where they will essentially just take a single API request and then treat that normally, distribute it down or otherwise. But I would say I think there's, generally speaking, multiple approaches to solve the problem, and it depends on the business requirements. And if cost is a really big driver, then yeah, you're going to have to keep at least some raw data in cloud native tooling due to the cost. Although I would also always make sure that you're aware of what those costs are, because there are, especially for retention, sometimes quite large costs for some of the native tooling that doesn't yet support object-based storage and still relies on, block-based storage. But that aside, you can end up with a seam of seams, so to speak, or a monitor of monitors, to use more legacy terms, where you're using one tool to aggregate either a subset of data itself that it receives as a stream, or on ad hoc queries or repeatable queries that pull in only the relative insights that it's looking for. Or of course you pull it all into one source where you hope that you can afford the cost of polling it in one direction. The third option that's coming, at least in Splunk land, so Splunk released this, then de-released it, and it was called Distributed Federated Search, DFS. I think that's what it was called. Tomasz is nodding. Oh, and Andrew's confirming. Yep. So they had that product, and that product, using a mixture of Spark, I think it was, to do the parallelization, supported querying other big data tools like Hadoop, like SQL, like NoSQL, like a number of other really big data platforms at scale, and then to aggregate it all through basically like the Splunk language to be presented. They discontinued the standalone product, but that's essentially, and I think they talked about this at Conf, so I don't think I'm releasing anything unknown here, but they're essentially rolling that into their new cloud platform that will be launching soon, of which Mission Control is one of the first products, and that is a truly cloud natively built, i.e. it's using things like serverless compute and all the other SaaS-based type applications and PaaS-based applications to try and implement that. So it's not just you have to have one Splunk environment. It will be able to talk to multiple Splunk environments, multiple indexes. Oh, you've got a Hadoop over there, that's fine. You've got Kafka over there, not a problem. And the idea is, as I understand it, and as I said, it's unreleased and I'm a complete novice in understanding it, but it tries to federate all of the big data accessible to Splunk through that layer to then provide what I think we all need, which is that aggregation platform without the cost of having it all live on a group of servers' hard drives. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so DFS we've POC'd, but not because of the ability to speak to other Splunk platforms. It was for large joins.
Yeah.
But I can't see Splunk really allowing us to have non-Splunk data lake in the cloud, because they want to charge us on the ingest. So if we ingest into some freeware like data lake, and then Splunk says, yeah, you can search that, no bother. I think they'll catch us.
So I think that's true to a point. I would say that Splunk is, and again, I don't think any of this is secret source at all, but Splunk is rapidly adopting different pricing approaches. One, and in fact, I think there is or will soon be 3 to 4 different ways of purchasing Splunk, including cloud. And 3 of them are not based on ingest. Some of them are based on number of queries. Some are based on number of like vCPUs. And so I think they're trying to move to a place where ingest is less punitive than it currently feels when you want to bring in more valuable data to get value out your tool, and you get stuck with an extra, $500,000 spend. How soon that's landing?
I agree. It's one of these. Yeah, it's one of these things where the more you almost prevent it from getting the most benefit out of the product. You want some room to live. Okay. Anyway, I think I've monopolized too much of your time, Harry.
Yeah, no worries. Well, look, if that's something you're thinking about, and I mean this in a non-salesy way, honestly, but do reach out, because it sounds like an interesting chat to have, and hopefully we'll both learn something from maybe a deeper conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. I will take you up on that.
No worries. Hey Idris, how you doing? Just in your pop up.
Yeah, sorry, I had an unexpected delivery during these pandemic times.
Happens. Well, welcome. So we've been doing a little bit of a roundtable. I've shared, Thomas has shared, Taryn shared. We've now got yourself and Ilias left. And so as Ilias, I think you were next in line. I think we should maybe go to you.
Sure, yeah. The story that I kind of thought of isn't exactly a deployment one. It's an upgrade one. I think it should still probably
I think that's close enough. Installing, operating, tearing down, I think they're all valid.
I do have a story with deploying Phantom, but that's a horror story.
Maybe on Halloween.
Yeah. Tom knows about it. Just to kind of put a full stop on that one, it was really hard to deploy a Phantom cluster out of the box in AWS. But the story I was thinking of is when I was consulting for a large bank who were keen on upgrading their Splunk infrastructure. In my pre-work, I found out that within the version change, there would be a small but quite significant change in how the search works when it comes to aliasing. So for whoever doesn't know, in Splunk, at search time, you have your fields that all your configuration that's already in place names, and then you also have field aliases where you can create other names to point to your original names, and that's basically done with a configuration which is called field aliasing. And how it works is you say original field as new field. So that's what you say in the configuration hall. And what Splunk changed is they just changed the behavior of what that does, and they added a new behavior which is called as new. So I won't go into detail because it's still confusing to this day, but I sorted it out at that point, and I then did a kind of impact analysis because my customer had hundreds of rules, and a lot of these rules were using fields, not the original names, but the field aliases. And in many cases, actually, these searches would break, and that's because for some reason because of the behavior, the actual value wouldn't be even there. So, for example, if we're doing a stats by, and that by was the name of the alias, it wouldn't find anything there, so the whole logic would break. So I wrote a script for that to be run, and that script, what it did is essentially change all the field aliases to the correct behavior after the upgrade. So that change, my script was to be run when while the upgrade was going on, actually in the between where they stop the servers and run the script, then upgrade. And so that was I think it was a Sunday where the change would happen. So come Monday morning, I log in 9 a.m. to see what happened. And the first thing I did is actually go on the field alias page and check that they all changed from as to as new. And they didn't. And then 15 minutes later, I assumed that the change didn't go forward and we didn't upgrade. But then I checked Splunk and we did upgrade, so I was confused. And then 15 minutes later, I saw them changing. So we go at the meeting and to see what, kind of to discuss what happened, and whoever was running the change forgot to run my script, and they realized Monday morning, and so the problem is that because the bank is regulated and their security, a lot of the security rules are also regulated. They need to have well, in case of an audit, it would seem that they were insecure for that particular window because of these rules breaking, and so that created a whole lot of new work for me, where I started creating scripts to be able to rerun whatever was supposed to run on that window, and I think that was one of the most challenging things I've done, because in Splunk it's not really easy to do that, and that's because one thing that really helped is that there is something in REST API and Splunk where you can actually move the current time to even in the future or in the past. So that helps a lot because you can trick Splunk into thinking that you're in the past. And then if your searches are doing last 15 minutes, they would do it, or minus 15 at M, it would do it from that fake time that you put in. So that means I didn't have to rerun rules with changing their time to create time windows. So that was really helpful. But the problem is a lot of the information that these searches and a lot of searches use are summaries or data models, and these also have their own timings, and some of them get also generated. So I wrote scripts to rerun and recreate the summaries, the correct summaries with the new field aliases, and then I wrote scripts to rerun all the rules from that window to essentially run them with the correct field alias. And the funny story with that is that had to happen in production, so, and as soon as possible. And the problem, the worst problem is that a lot of these summaries were being used by rules that were going to run in the next days, if that makes sense. So like it was Monday, but on Wednesday, a rule would run and look back 7 days back. So for the window that the field aliases were broken, they wouldn't get accurate data. Now, obviously, that could have been a risk accepted by the customer, but because of these really extremely important rules, it wasn't. So so essentially, yeah, I had to rerun hundreds of rules in production with minimal testing because I was basically racing the clock. So that's essentially kind of definitely a war story. I think I have some scars left.
And if you were to take one key lesson away, what do you think it would be?
For me personally, it would be to make sure to review the change documents, see if the customer did actually put that step in their run book. I think it's called run book. But I think I think, yeah, the takeaway from the story is that even if the worst comes to the worst, you can still script your way out of it. I think I think it's
I think you've
the
just
sky's the
described a
limit.
tattoo that Tomasz actually has across his chest. Just script your way out.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in cybersecurity, as many of you will know, there's kind of I don't know, there's kind of like a fundamental truth as far as I can see it, and that's trust but verify. And it's funny how many times that can apply to basic, well, not necessarily basic, but general IT as well. You're kind of like, well, it was in the run book, and I told them to run the script, and so the change was successful. Of course, they ran it. Did they? Well, yep. Let's assume they did, but let's just verify it. Let's just go and check. And yeah, I think so many incidents would be avoided, or at least detected much earlier, if we had more of a but verify mentality across all of IT, let alone cybersecurity.
Yeah, and to add to that, my scripts had to be multi-threaded, otherwise it would take ages to run. So I had to do that as well, which is not real multi-threading because I was writing in Python, but still you need to be aware of possible deadlocks and race conditions.
Yeah.
So that was really fun.
Some rapidly learning parallel computing.
Yeah.
It's not it. Like, people often think, including myself, oh, you just add a switch. Surely you just go from serial to parallel. You just replace an S with a P, right? No.
Nope.
No. That's not how it works. Okay. Thank you, Elias. Brilliant story. Idris, last but not least, do you have a story for us to share?
Yeah, I have a recent one. It'll be a bit light and refreshing, more relevant to the times we live in. So this particular customer in the financial services space wanted to look for users, or basically their own employees, who are working from outside the UK. So it's a pretty easy use case to set up, right? So you do a GeoIP lookup, and using the GeoIP database that is in Splunk, you look for any other country that's not the United Kingdom. Brilliant. So that was set up. It fired a few days later, and then it went to the SOC, and then there was an incident responder who handled it, looked into it, investigated it, and they were insisting that that user was working in India. And then the user was sending them like screenshots. No, I'm here. I'm working in my home. Here's my IP address. I've got this ISP, etc. So we looked into it, and it turned out that the GeoIP database was out of date.
MaxMind.
Yeah. MaxMind. Yep. So Splunk was running on version 7.3. They decided not to fix it until we upgraded to version 8, even though the fix was pretty easy. You can just download a database file, put MMDB, put it on the indexes, and presto, it will work. But now I think they've got a monthly task to update that as every month. So yeah, pretty
unlucky.
Different.
And so it sounds like the kind of the fix, so to speak, is yet to materialize. But how would you fix that forward if you could advise somebody going through a similar setup, or indeed the organization, if you could push them in perhaps a more action rather than just put a plaster on it? What do you think that would be?
I think apply your maintenance release updates, at least, to not if you're doing a full upgrade, but at least have a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Not for the reasons of new features, bug fixes, even just core functionality.
Yeah,
you might get hit by the unexpected otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting how I see a kind of small correlation here with what Tom was talking about in Phantom, and that is, so the geolocation of an IP address is a relatively moving target. Okay, it may not be hourly, but it does change. And so is that kind of information best solved downstream, in the big data tool, where it's a static database of fields that you have to update sporadically as a batch job? Or is it something you should query as a stateful inspection and results of, here's the IP address based on all available information, what is the current location? And I would say the obvious is, well, the latter. You know, you want to know right now, where's that IP address, not where was it a month ago necessarily.
Yeah, 100%.
Interesting. Awesome. Well, recognizing that, you know, we've definitely been going on for some time, as I do love the sound of my own voice. I do want to just, you know, I think there's probably more stories to share. I could definitely talk for longer, as I'm sure you all could, especially if I picked on you. But let's open it up for questions. You know, we've got 5 people here, and I'm sure many more who aren't on the panel, who've got lots of different experiences. So are there any questions that you'd like us to have a little chat about? Just pop your hand up, top right hand corner of Teams. I'll call your name, unmute, ask it in the chat. If there are no more, then I might just ask our panel if they'll humour me and just maybe share 1 or 2 more stories max. But yeah, any questions? Oh, I was going to say Billy again there. Jonathan, go for it.
Okay, so we have a machine learning use case where the profile of the user is quite different from your average user. So they keep hitting various settings in limits.conf. Now, if the setting is to a user-based setting, then we can put them in we can create a capability to, you know, allow them to use more disk or whatever. If it's a search-based setting, we can, you know, do something about that as well. The trouble is, if it's like a server-based setting, then we kind of trust them. That, you know, they're skilled users, but all the dumb stuff that other users do won't hit the limits which are currently protecting our plant from falling over. So it's not them, it's everyone else. And so what we thought about doing was we've got a VIP that spreads across currently 7 search heads. So we thought, well, let's get another search head and call it the machine learning search head and create a new VIP, you know, like Splunk ML API.company.com, Splunk ML GUI. But so then we thought, right, okay, so should this be part of our search head cluster? So if it is part of the search head cluster, then it gets the replicated bundles with all the lookups and all that kind of cool stuff, which I'm pretty sure they need. I haven't spoken to them. But it makes it 8 search heads, which means that's an even number, and that's super bad. So I'm just in a kind of like architectural quandary at the moment of like, what do I do here, and have I missed something? So that's my question.
So you could, and I have no idea if this would even come close to best practices or even quantifies advice, but say you equipped a standalone search head, didn't connect it to the search cluster, but did connect it to the indexing cluster. You could use something other than Splunk to replicate the bundles. So you could either deploy a deployment server that search head called into and use something like rsync just to replicate the contents of the captain to that, which it would then distribute down to the search head. Like, it would be a roundabout way of doing it. So I'm thinking standalone deployment server, or even just directly to the search head, but basically, you know, mirroring, rsyncing the contents of the captain, or indeed any of them, you know, their bundle to the search head and triggering via a script to restart when it got it. You could maybe do that, and then you would be able to keep them separate, but they would maintain some kind of parity in their knowledge, although it wouldn't go the other way, I guess. Any other thoughts of a way to possibly achieve that?
As you say, Matt, I've got another thought, which I'm interested in getting shot down here. So we've got 7 search heads. Let's say I take one of the 7 out of the main VIP, so users would never hit that 7th. And then I create another VIP, which is just that 7th. Is there any reason why that would not work?
No. I mean, you know, the search heads are essentially dumb to where their users are coming from. They just see a user, authenticate them. If they're part of a search head cluster, they will obviously then distribute searches throughout depending on schedules and everything else. So if you had a search head cluster and a separate search head, I wouldn't see any issue with that.
I thought something like, so the limits.conf modifications that we're going to apply to this machine learning search head, which are going to be global, we were intending to deploy in an app, so that they would override. So sub-search limit is the one that are currently getting hit, which is like 50,000. It's just not enough. So if we in a search head cluster, can you have different apps on different search heads? Or is it expected that the same set of apps go into all search heads?
You could have a local app, not deployed and distributed via the search head cluster, I think. But again, someone who's used the search head cluster more recently can maybe confirm.
I think it will replicate if you try to install it. Unless you install it
in
through the file system.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If you deployed it directly in system, it wouldn't or shouldn't, I think.
But I wonder if wouldn't it get removed next time that the cluster resynced?
No, if it's in system, because system you have to bootstrap the servers, right, by messing with system.
Oh, into system local, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the whole app.
So we could go away from using the app paradigm and actually just force it into system local limits.conf. Would that if I had one search head and I edited that file manually, that wouldn't replicate, would it?
Don't think so. Worth testing for sure. Definitely.
I do like your idea. I mean, if you could take that bundle and somehow fool this other search head into thinking it's part of, or making it part of the cluster by doing something manual.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think you'd even need to break it from the cluster. Like, so if you've got a search head cluster, there's seven hosts. One of those hosts, you take out the VIP, so users aren't hitting it anymore. Still part of the cluster, so it's still receiving search jobs from the master potentially. Sorry, the captain, not the master. I need to get my terms right. So it would still be distributing. It would still be participating in the cluster as one of the children of the captain, but it wouldn't be receiving any ad hoc traffic, I think. So then you would be able to have that as ML only, modify system local, which the whole point of system local is to be able to do proprietary, non-cluster based stuff to it, right? If you want to mess with the name or anything, you do it there.
I've actually thought of another problem. If it's getting searches, it won't be applying limits to them. So it might serve data in a non-limited way.
Are you using work-based limiting? Workload-based limiting, I think it's called.
No, we've got no workload management. It's just the things like you can't export more than 100,000 records. You can't have more than.
So are you using Linux underneath? Are you using a Linux OS?
Yeah.
So I think, and I've never implemented it because it was past the time I was doing that kind of stuff, but I'm sure workload-based limiting, which was a new function introduced in like 7 dot something, maybe 7.6. I'm sure that lets you, even within a cluster, set groups and set additional limits based on.
Yeah. I think actually that is a really good call. Yeah, we haven't implemented it. We just it's always been something that is next on the list. But workload, yeah, okay, that's a really good shout. I think that's probably the first port of call.
Any other thoughts other than my tangled web of dreams?
No, I think you're onto something. I'm not sure you can change the sub-search limit on a workload, but you should be able to set constraints so that even if a sub-search went completely haywire and was about to crash the system, the workload should catch that and prevent the system from going down at the very least. Yeah,
because you can set it via compute limits, right? So you can say you cannot use more than 80% of available CPU. Yeah, and it distributes that down to the indexing tier as well, doesn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, so you can limit a specific search head basically from taking over the cluster and bringing it to a halt. Okay, cool. Right. Well, I do think we're approaching 7, and I recognise people probably have things to go, people to see, and by that I mean, obviously, have a cup of tea and probably go to bed because it's a pandemic. But thank you everybody for your time. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to Andrew. Oh, wait a second. We can't tie up yet. I just realized we've got the prize giveaway. Andrew, are you there?
Yeah, yes.
Ah, you came very close there. I almost went on autopilot to shut things down. I chair too many meetings. Andrew, how do you want to do this? What do you want me to do?
If you have the link open and then just dump the names into there.
I have already got the names pre-dumped, which is a word I hope I never use again.
And just show your screen. Just.
Yep, there we go.
So, could you just hit shuffle a couple of times, because I think it's just in alphabetical order at the moment.
Yep, shuffle, and I've made sure it will run for at least one full rotation. So I've set it for, it should be pretty randomized by now.
Okay. So the first prize is for the JetBrains subscription.
Okay, JetBrains subscription coming right up. Oh. Oh wow, that kept going way longer than I thought it was going to. Oh, there we go. Okay, we have a winner.
Okay. So we'll get in contact with you, Lejon, in due course, and we'll provide you with a code for JetBrains.
Congratulations. Okay.
Put your name down so I remember it. JetBrains. This is for a £20 prize. We're going to have to discuss what it is, but hopefully we'll find something for you to get delivered.
Okay, for 20 of Andrew's English pounds.
Scottish. Come on.
Sorry, Scottish pounds. It's not legal tender, you know.
Oh.
You have to tweak this to.
Can you remove LeJohn's name, because he's not meant to be.
It's all right. We've gone past, but yeah. That I'll re-randomize again.
Yeah.
Rajesh, looks like you are a winner.
Okay. Rajesh will get in contact with you at some point in the next couple of days to work out how to deal with it. Just remove. And LeJohn.
Just trying to find him. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this is for the £50.
Okay, so this is for the first place prize. Just going to keep shuffling a few more times. And here we go. This is where I realized that it's just been stuck on my face the whole time. You can't see the wheel, and I'm just narrating a spinning wheel, which is not what I thought I'd be doing in my 30s.
That new show music, Michael McIntyre as the wheel.
We removed the wrong person.
Oh no.
Yeah.
What?
I think there's 2 Rajeshes.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's going to be a respin.
Who won?
Lucky Brad.
You can just watch the recording.
Yeah.
Shall I do a respin then, Andrew? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Bradley would just get annoyed with me at work, but.
Okay, I'll do a respin. So I apologize for that. That's on me. So where is the person I should have got rid of? I should have checked the full name.
I think you can just Control Z and.
Nope, that doesn't work. Let me pop it back in and get rid of the right people. Here we go. Someone's trying to join. They're going to be disappointed.
I think they're already in. I think they just dropped off.
Okay, so I'm getting rid of. So this person is going because they have won. Hold on. Rajesh M. This one. Yeah, happy?
Yeah.
Awesome. Apologies for that. Next time you see me, I will try to give you a t-shirt. Possibly the one I'm wearing, but we'll see. Okay. I feel like it's kind of like a da 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 da.
You can get music on this. I'm not quite sure why it's.
I disabled it because it was jarring. When I tested it, I was very glad I was on mute because it came very, very loud through my my sound system. Oh, and we've got it right.
Robert,
there you
who
go.
literally just rejoined to win this. So
Yeah, it's almost like that was planned. I promise you, it wasn't.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, conspiracy. It's Phantom controlling everything, or a Phantom. Who knows? Excellent. Well, Andrew will jump right on that because he is a diligent person.
maybe
you.
after dinner.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's fair. I think we're all probably a little bit peckish by now. Well, look, thank you everyone that stuck around for the prize draw. Andrew, anything to add before? Oh, there we go. Do join the Splunk User Group LinkedIn or indeed the community Slack. You will find us there under hashtag Edinburgh, i.e. channel Edinburgh. If you're ever interested in presenting, getting into a round table, any of these things, just reach out. Andrew and myself and all of the engineers and consultants at Adama are always, here to present. We're more than happy to share with you what we know or sometimes think we know, speaking for myself. But, we all, even more want to hear from you. So if you've got suggestions, if you'd like to present, if you'd like to try your hand at running the event, feel free, reach out. We'll try our best to make it happen. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you to Andrew who organised this. Really, really thank you, because I definitely did not have the time and he put a lot of effort in to try and make this go as smoothly as possible. Just really appreciate it. Thank you to Tom who presented on risk-based response, risk-based alerting earlier on. And thank you to everyone who took part in our round table and asked questions. So enjoy the rest of your week. I hope you keep safe through the pandemic. Andrew, anything to add?
No, I think you covered it all. We're always looking for new speakers, so please feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, thanks again all, and see you next time.
Thank you.